welcome to the Jeff Rubin Show. I am Jeff Rubin, and today my guest is Ben Blumenfeld, a designer who worked at Facebook from 2007 until very recently. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks so much. How's it going?
It's going really well. Thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome. I'm a big fan.
Oh, Ben.
I am. It's true.
Well,
Your go-to. You and Pete Holmes.
I love Pete's podcast too. Did you hear when Pete was on this podcast? That must have been your favorite.
Yeah, that was my transitional. It's like, oh, I heard him on your podcast, and then I thought, whoa, he's good. I'll go listen to his podcast. He hasn't yet replaced you at the top, but it's happened before.
That's very nice of you to say. I mean, I'm a fan of your work because I use Facebook all the time, just like the rest of human civilization.
Not everyone.
But most people, and I don't even think that's an exaggeration, I think like literally more than 50% of the people use Facebook.
Well, I think we're closing in on 1 billion, so I think we're, what is it, a sixth of humanity or seventh, something like that?
If I get those numbers for this podcast, that'd be great. But you've been working at Facebook for quite a while. You weren't there at the beginning, but you've been there for a while now. So when you first started working there, were you looking to work at Facebook specifically, or were you just looking for a job and this is what came up?
No, I actually wasn't looking for anything. And actually, I don't even know if you know this, but Zach Klein is involved in my coming to Facebook. And actually,
I didn't know that.
In another way, Amir is also involved.
So Zach, for those that don't know, is one of the founders of College Humor and a friend of mine and a wonderful person. He started this new website called DIY.org, which is awesome. And Amir is your brother, who is also a good friend and coworker and a wonderful human being. So now we've got the backstory. So how did you get involved in Facebook?
So I was actually down in LA. I joined a friend of mine who had a web development agency at the time, and we were building a company called Varian. And our whole goal was to develop our own products, and we were doing really well. In about a year, we grew the company from about 7 to 25 people. And that's when I got a call from Zach. And he was actually wondering if I wanted to work at College Humor, Vimeo, that kind of.
I do vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was, he asked me, he's like, "Hey, would you consider it?" And I said, "Look, I'm building this thing, and I'm flattered, but I'm not really looking to move to do something new." And he goes, "Okay, great. Well, another friend of mine wanted to talk to you about being a designer, so he'll call you too." And I was like, "Whoa! I just told you, no, don't have anyone call me." And he told me that he'd already promised him that I would talk to him. And he's like, just talk to him for a few minutes. And if you don't like it, just say no. And that guy was Jeff Hammerbacher, who was the first data scientist at Facebook. And he gave me the pitch of like, hey, do you want to come work at this company? It's called Facebook. And at the time, all I knew about Facebook was that our interns were on it all the time. This was in middle of '06. And that's all I knew. It's just like I had to walk out of my office and just tell the interns, like, hey, stop using that thing, like, go get back to work. And I told him the same thing I told Zach, like, really flattered, thank you, but thanks, but no thanks. And what happened was he said, look, we'll fly you out here for free, and you'll get to meet cool people, and if you don't like it, you fly back down to LA. And at the time, my older brother, Yair, I don't know if you've met him.
I don't know that I have, actually, yeah. I've met your parents, but I don't know that I've met Yair.
Yeah, so he was an OBGYN, still is, at Stanford. And right before I hung up the phone, I asked Jeff, where are you guys located? Because I didn't even know where they were. And he said, we're in Palo Alto. And I realized, oh my God, that's where my older brother is. And so I told him, listen, if you're willing to fly me out and accept the fact that the chance of me joining you guys is 0.01%, I'll do it. And he said, yeah, we'll take that risk. That's fine with us. And so they flew me up, and over a weekend, I got to meet everyone and kind of see what they were doing. And really, I just came up there to talk to people. I wasn't looking for work, and in my head, I was like, I am not joining this like ridiculous company, no way in hell. But when I came up here and met all the people that were working on it at the time, I mean, you just realized how amazing the vision and the caliber of people at the company were. And I had a good 2-hour conversation with Zuck about the future of Facebook and kind of what he wanted to do. And he was, he's 21, 22 years old at the time. And I just thought, man, either this guy's a genius or crazy or both, but he's just going to go for it. And it was just this moment where I thought, man, I gotta do this. And so I did it. I told my partner that I was going to join Facebook. I took a few months off and then joined in February of '07.
And where was Facebook at that moment in time? What was the service like? It's MySpace is still a thing. It's not clear who's going to win that battle.
No. MySpace was still way bigger than Facebook at the time. They were when I talked to them, Facebook had just opened up beyond college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like the big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there was a few million people on it. I mean, it was still, it was doing well. There was no doubt that they were crushing it in the college sphere, but it wasn't clear that it was going to be this huge thing, at least not to me, but to some people at Facebook. I mean, that was clear from day one.
What did Zuckerberg say to you, like, in that meeting?
I mean, he said that we are going to build this thing that changes the way everyone in the world communicates. We're going to get everyone in the world to use this. And we'll do it without you, but we'd love to have you join too. He says that, and you look at him and you're just like, this isn't someone who's like, yeah, we'll get, a lot of people. He was just like, we'll get everyone in the world. And you're just like, what is this guy thinking? But yeah, you just look at him and he's just serious. He was serious about it.
And I imagine in your time there, once you became established, you got to hire other designers just like they hired you, right?
Yep.
What do you look for when you're looking for a Facebook designer? What do you think they saw in you?
Well, in me, I mean, so when I was there, actually, the bar for a designer was so high. I actually think we had it too high. But basically, we were looking for rock stars who were in both technical, visual design, product design, interaction design. We wanted across the board someone who was amazing on all four of those verticals.
Are designers usually only specializing in one of those things?
It's very rare that you'll find a designer that's both really good technically and really great visually and a really great product strategy thinker. Usually, maybe a designer's really great visually, but they can't really code. Or maybe they can code, but their visuals suck, because each one of those things really takes a lot of time and energy and experience to get good at. It's even in the Valley, you'll often hear of those kinds of designers referred to as unicorns because people say, well, they don't really exist. Don't even try to get one of those. But they do exist, but it's very hard to find them.
Do you think you're one of those designers?
Everywhere I had been up to Facebook, I was the most technical designer. And when I got to Facebook, I was the least. I mean, it was just like mind-boggling how technical. Their designers were more technical than engineers I had worked with. And so, I'm relatively, I can code sort of, I would say. But when you come to Silicon Valley and you see how good people can code up here, it's just like, you feel like a hack. You're like, yeah, I can sort of code, maybe.
But doesn't that make you better working with people who are better than you?
Oh my God, yeah. No, you become just, like a head and shoulders. It's amazing, yeah. Being around people of that caliber, you just can't help but, suck all that in. I remember actually even because I was a kind of a creative lead at Varian, which meant I wasn't doing a lot of the coding for a few years. I hadn't really coded. And when I told Facebook that, they said, oh, that's no problem. You won't really need to code here either. And I said, oh, well, that's great. And the first day when I got to my desk, there were about 6 books that were like Intro to PHP, Advanced HTML, Advanced CSS. And I was like, what's all this? And they're like, get started. I was like, I'm pretty sure the interview you guys said wasn't going to be coding. And they go, yeah, no, you'll code. So yeah, I got to coding a lot that first year and a half.
You got hoodwinked.
I got hoodwinked in a big way.
Is there something a Facebook designer has to be good at or has to do that a designer at any other company, at any other service, wouldn't have to worry about?
Yeah, I mean, especially now, you have to think about scale. I mean, to design for 900 million people is crazy, right? I mean, it's easy to design for yourself or design for people like you. But think about designing something that a 85-year-old grandma in Czechoslovakia can use and something that a 13-year-old in Japan can also use. Right, you can see how that becomes just unbelievably daunting.
I mean, I'm not a designer, but to me, it sounds literally impossible. How do you do that?
you try to follow these, like, well, one, you try to make stuff that's absolutely as simple as it can be, right? We always like strip and strip and strip until we get to the core essence of what a product should do. Another thing you do a lot more user research. Back in the day, we would just test it ourselves, and if we could use something, then that was a good chance that college students could use it. But now, I mean, you really need to bring in moms, you need to bring in younger kids, you need to bring in different cultures. So there's a lot of testing that goes on these days, as opposed to back in the day when it was a little bit more off the cuff.
2007, it doesn't sound like that long ago, and yet we're still calling it back in the day. And in internet time, it's eons. I mean, just MySpace is such a punchline now, and it's incredible to think of them as a legitimate competitor to Facebook, even though it wasn't that long ago. When did it become clear that Facebook was going to win that fight?
Inside Facebook, we knew it. You saw the graphs, right? So you saw we always had a graph of our kind of user base and MySpace user base, and you can just extrapolate the slopes, and we actually knew, you could see where it was going to happen. We knew when it was going to happen. It was just a matter of execution, and it was so clear too, the execution on the MySpace side. I mean, if you remember using that thing, I mean, it was a joke. It was crazy.
It was really bad.
It's one thing if you see the graphs, but you think well, they also have a good product, and it's going to be a dogfight. But we always thought that, we were building this thing that was so fast, so efficient. It just felt like that was kind of an inevitable thing that would happen, and we just needed to execute to make it happen.
So now you're there. You're working there. You're at Facebook. What is your day-to-day life like? How do you plan?
When I was there, it's very hard. There's no, even designers that are thinking about joining ask me about day-to-day, and every day is so different. And often there will be, kind of certain sets of months where we go into different modes as a company. And so maybe, over the course of 2 or 3 months, it might be like relatively mellow, but then all of a sudden 2 or 3 months we get, we decide that we're going to go after some product or try to build something really fast, and you'll get people working over the weekends and working late into the night, and holing up in rooms, and it becomes a different sort of intensity. We like to kind of cycle the intensity. And it's very open. I mean, we had people, during the early days, there was a kid that I used to, when people asked me, what are the hours like, And there was a kid named Eugene who used to work 36-hour shifts. So he would come in the morning, work all through the night, up till the end of the day, the following day, and then he'd take a day off, and then he'd do it again. And he came from a much larger company where they told him, well, you got to be in by 9 and out by 5 or whatever. And he was just, for him, it's like, well, that's not going to work. And when at Facebook, he could just do whatever hours he wanted.
As long as he was getting his job done, which sounds like he was.
Yeah. And, even now, if you came at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, there would be people there. Facebook is one of those companies where people are just super passionate about the product because all your family uses, all your friends use it. And you hear it when it's not good. All your friends tell you, hey, what's up with this? This sucks. This doesn't work, right?
I bet. I mean, I can only imagine, every time you tell people, when they ask you where you work, and you say, oh, I work at Facebook, I bet there is a response to that you heard all the time, like a suggestion or a complaint. Is that true?
Oh, my God, yeah.
What were some common ones that would come up when you told people you worked at Facebook?
There'd be, the dislike button we still get, which blows my mind. It's just like people are like, I want to just tell people how much I don't like the things they're doing, and it's so obvious that a dislike button should not exist, right? It's just like, how much negativity do you want in the world? People tell me, hey, someone's stalking me, or maybe I'm locked out of my account. You get all sorts of stuff. I remember actually one story, one of the most memorable things that someone did to me about 2 months in to my Facebook experience. We used to make bags for the employees that had big Facebook logos on them. And early on, you wanted to show off that you were at Facebook, right? Because it was this, this like little niche social network. And so I had a big Facebook logo bag on the New York City subway on a Friday, and the subway's packed, and a woman grabs my arm, and the nails are digging so deep into my arm before I even like hear the voice. And I look over, and she looks at me, and she's like a few inches from my face, and she says, "Do you work at Facebook?" And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I said, yeah, well, that depends who's asking. Trying to cut attention with a little bit of humor.
A solid strategy for when crazy people accost you in New York.
Absolutely. And she says, "Don't you fuck with me. Do you or do you not work there?" So that's when I knew it was kind of a serious confrontation. And everyone, there's always those moments on the New York City subway where there's the normal kind of crazy, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh,
yeah,
shit.
yeah, this might be a thing.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is going down. And so she says, "Don't you fuck with me. Do you not work there?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And she yells out, "You ruined my life."
Did she elaborate? How did you ruin her life?
Yeah. So I said, "Well, okay, well, what happened?" And she says, "I was out on a date, and someone took a photo of me out on that date and posted it to Facebook. And my boyfriend, who I love, saw it and broke up with me. You ruined my life."
That sounds like she ruined her life and you just enabled it a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm standing there and I'm thinking through what she said, and I go, "I need you to repeat back what I think I heard you say." And she goes, "Sure." I go, "You were out on a date with someone not your boyfriend." She goes, "Yep." I said,
Whom you loved.
yeah, exactly. Someone took a photo of you and posted it to Facebook? Yeah. He found out and broke up with you? Yeah. We ruined your life? Yep. And then I felt the collective energy of that subway train going, "Go for it, let her have it. She's crazy. We're behind you." Like a few people take a step back because they realize, like, here we go, give him space, give him space. But the thing about, working for a company like that is you realize like everything that you do is going to affect the way people perceive you and the way people perceive the company. And so there was 90% of my energy wanted to just shake this woman and be like, "What's the matter with you? You were cheating on your boyfriend, right? Don't blame me." But I just said like, "Wow, well, I'll tell you what, that sucks. This is still a new communication medium. People are still trying to figure it out. I'm really sorry that happened." And everyone's head exploded around me because they were expecting me to just lean into her. And she was just like, "Whoa, okay, I appreciate it. Thank you." And she walked off. But, she walked off, and you could see the nail marks where she held me the whole time. You could just see those marks where she held on. And that was an anomaly, a little bit, but those kinds of things, they wouldn't be that rare that you'd get the intimate human stories of the way that you were affecting people's lives.
Yeah, was that ever in your mind as you worked there? Because obviously you're not responsible for that woman's breakup, but Facebook has played such a big part in so many people's lives, getting people together, reconnecting friends. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
No, yeah, it's in your mind all the time. I mean, one of the moments when I knew that this was going to be kind of a big thing. Do you remember like the Virginia Tech shooting?
Yeah.
And so, up to that point, it was Facebook was still kind of a light, fun tool. We knew what we wanted it to be, but it wasn't necessarily actually living up to that quite yet. But during the Virginia Tech shooting, the phone system went down because so many phone calls were trying to go in and out of the school. And one of the guys at Facebook was like, "Hey guys, everyone at Virginia Tech is using Facebook to kind of tell their friends and parents that they're okay." People were setting their status to "I'm okay, I didn't get shot." And he goes, "Right now we're an emergency response, so the site does not go down today." And you could just feel the like seriousness and the tension and the gravity of the situation that day. Just it went up to this whole nother level, and it kind of stayed. We realized, hey, this isn't just a thing that people are using for fun, lighthearted communication. A lot of people are using this in a very serious way. And so, yeah, it's on your mind constantly. I mean, people, yeah.
Facebook is just this critical part of a lot of people's lives, and you can tell how important it is when you change anything and they get very, very upset,
Yeah.
very vocally. So, how many people do I need to join my group before Facebook finally gets rid of Newsfeed?
Um, can you imagine the revolt if we got rid of newsfeed? There's so often, you hear people say like, "I want the old Facebook," and every so often we talk about, well, let's give them like the really old Facebook if they want it so bad, the one without like photos or newsfeed or anything else, and just be like, "You wanted it, here you go, old Facebook." It's not about, so for us, it's much not about the number of people, because people don't like change. I don't know if you've noticed this, but any sort of change is kind of a big deal for humans. And so the thing that you need to listen for is not, hey, we hate this. You need to understand why they hate the change. So if 2 million people are saying we hate it because it's different, well, in a few weeks it won't be that different. But if they're saying, hey, we hate this because I can't find information about my friend, or I hate this because I can no longer talk to my mom the way I used to be able to, then that's a big deal. So it only takes a few hundred people to say, I can't talk to my parents the way I used to, for us to make a change or a modification. So it's much less about the numbers and much more about what the feedback actually is.
Does it ever hurt morale at the company when you launch a new feature and that's the reaction?
It's become this thing. I remember one, we can cuss on the show, right?
Oh, yeah. I thought you listened to it.
Yeah, I mean, but I can't remember if it's supposed to be clean or what.
Fuck it.
Yeah, you see, you tend to not cuss that much.
I know. The thing is, I don't know when I do, and you have to choose if it's clean or explicit when you put it up on iTunes, and I used to, like, worry about it and mark the clean ones, and then I was just like, I'm just going to mark them all as explicit. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, so this one's going to be explicit. So there was one launch when I remember we decided that we would post tweets. It's like, let's launch this thing and then I think maybe it was Timeline or something, and we would just post. We would show a projected giant wall of tweets about the thing that we were posting, and so we had worked months, maybe even a year on Timeline. I think it was Timeline, but it might have been something else, a new homepage or something. Let's just say it's a new homepage. And we project the tweets, and like literally the first tweet is something like, fuck you, Facebook, for the page. I hope you get raped in the ass. And I looked around at like the people there, and it's just like, you'd work nights and weekends. And we looked around and we're like, we did it. And we high-fived.
That's so funny.
Accomplished. No, it does, but
because that's not a legitimate complaint, really.
Yeah, I hope you get raped in the ass. Like, at least it's almost like if that passion exists, you're doing something right.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
At least they hate us.
I'm surprised to hear you guys are using tweets. I assume Facebook. I don't even know why. I just assume you guys are kind of, averse to that.
Oh, we're open to all technologies. You got to use what's out there. I mean, we do. We search Facebook too, but we search Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anything that people are using.
Do you have a Google Plus account?
I do.
I do too. You had to get there and just like kind of plant the flag just in case, right?
Oh yeah, /Blumenfeld.
Yeah. Now people can find you on Google Plus.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. I mean, in a way, I don't know. It's interesting. Google is one of these things where we're always like, man, if they like put together all these different products and services into a compelling social thing, like that could be something interesting. And then Google Plus came out and you're like, wow, this is nice. But it's just like, Google's just not where it's not where the people are, right? It's not where your friends are. It's not where your family is. You don't think of like, hey, I want to go hang out with friends. I'll go on Google. You know?
I will say this about Google. I think you're generally right, but Gmail, I kind of live in Gmail. And Gmail I don't even know at what point it just kind of replaced AIM for me, which used to be a place where I live. So that seems like possibly a place where they can get their foot in their door. Like, it does kind of know who all my friends are via that.
It's interesting because you're actually talk to any 13, 14-year-old and ask them what their email is.
Yeah.
And they'll like, what? And you'll say, email. And they're like, what's that? It's like, what before text? Oh, I don't get why you would do that.
And they use Facebook.
They use Facebook and they text. They don't need email. That's not to say that email has its place, but think about how bad email is.
It is bad. I thought Google Wave was bad, but when that video came out and they were like, email is broken, I was like, I'm glad they recognize that problem.
Right.
Though I don't know that Google Wave was the exact solution for it.
Yeah. No, I don't think it was. It clearly was not.
I always thought your Twitter profile was so interesting. Your profile on Twitter, which are short, it's hard to write a good one. Yours is designer at Facebook, focusing on how to guide 500 million people. You got to update that. Designer at Facebook, focusing on how to guide 1 billion people through an ever-changing product. No pressure.
Yeah. The thing I started focusing on towards the end of my time at Facebook was user education and guiding users through change, because we just weren't doing a great job of, even though people don't like change, but there are a number of things that you can do to make sure that people have a good experience. And so some of it's just so simple, and so it's dotting the I's and crossing the T's, right? So it's like, hey, let someone know that the change is coming. When it is available, let them try it out for a little bit. Let them opt into it, play with it. For the people who need more hand-holding, give them a little bit more help, maybe a tour, maybe some other help resources. Let them engage with friends potentially, or let friends help each other. There's some just basic things that you can do. And so that's what, towards the end, that's really what I was focusing on, was making sure that all the stuff that we were shipping, because we have just such this mentality of like ship, that sometimes we forget how big we are, and that you need to take a little bit more time and effort to guide that many people through a change. And so that's what I focused on. The last thing I did was a timeline. So I don't know if you noticed kind of all the stuff with timeline, and so that it said like, hey, timeline's coming. Take a tour, try it out.
You had that video.
We had the video, all that good stuff.
That's kind of interesting. What are some things besides timeline that you actually worked on and touched in Facebook that I probably use every day?
If you ever signed up for Facebook,
I must have at some point. I honestly don't even remember it, but at some point I must have. I've got the account.
Yeah. So one of the things I did early on was the wizard. So it was kind of this, before you used to just sign up, and then we just drop you onto this page, like an empty newsfeed, and you're like, what? I said, hey, well, what if we actually guided people through, step 1, kind of enter some info, step 2, find some friends, step 3. And so that little bit of a wizard was huge, because all of a sudden when the big aha moment for people who are just like, I don't want to be on Facebook, there's nothing there for me, was when they join and they enter their name and some information, and then they see this grid of people they haven't seen in 20 to 25 years. That moment, you just see their face, light up, and they're just it's over. At that point, it's totally over. So it was just a matter of getting people to that point where they just see people that they care about, or that they miss, or that they haven't spoken to in a while.
And how'd you do that?
So it's basically, it's enter a little bit of information. Hey, where are you from? What school did you go to? Right. So if you say, hey, I went to such and such high school in such and such year, we can show you all the people that we have that went to that high school during that year. The contact importer. So if you say like, hey, look at all the people in my address book, or any of them on Facebook. So that's a good way also. So there's a lot of those relevant pieces of information that you can match them up to the people on Facebook. So that was one thing I did. There's some internal tools I did early on that were huge. All the way one of the first things I did also was Facebook platform. I don't know if you remember that.
What was that one?
So it's basically, back in the day, Facebook was just Facebook. There were no games or apps or anything like that. And so when I first joined was when we started conceiving of this idea of a Facebook platform that apps.
So the whole platform?
Yeah.
That's a pretty major milestone in Facebook's history, isn't it?
Oh my God, yeah. And that was also, I mean, that took huge balls, right? Because you're thinking,
MySpace, first of all.
right, yeah, this thing's gonna, one, like, you give up a ton of control, and two, like, will it actually work? Will people build on it? Will it be interesting enough? Like, I mean, it opens up a whole other, realm and complexity and all this stuff. And so, it takes a gut check to say, like, yeah, let's do this, and hopefully it works out. But I remember we launched it at F8, and we were just thinking, like, oh man, I hope people actually use this. And I think the big one was early on. I don't know if you remember it was that music application.
What'd it do?
It just let you see. It was just like, hey, what are the artists and the music that you like? And then your friends could see the music that you liked. And you could listen to little 30-second snippets. I think you couldn't even listen to all the songs. But that first night, 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, they were just joining. It was like a few hundred people every few minutes. And by the morning, it was like 8,000 or 20,000. And we were like, wow, 20,000 people are using iLike. This is insane. Wow, 20,000. And yeah, sure enough, like a year later, it's like 10 million, 20 million. And I think like some Zynga games have like 100 million people. You're just like, really? A third of the U.S. is playing Farmville. Okay.
I'm going to level with you, Ben. I do not like any Facebook apps. There's none I use, with the notable exception of You Don't Know Jack, who was recently on the show, and I think their game is great. So I'm wondering, there must be some out there. What do you enjoy that is on the Facebook platform?
So I think you're thinking of games that you play within Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So I think the big do you use Spotify?
Yeah. Sure.
Goodreads or Pinterest or there's so many sites and apps. I mean, our vision for Facebook was not even to keep it within the Facebook frame, because Facebook is a site that a lot of people go to, but really, in the future, we want Facebook to just be the social layer that adds all this great social component to any service. And so the thing, you probably don't even consider them apps, but Pinterest is in a way a Facebook application, because they use the Facebook social graph to connect you with all your friends that are using Pinterest. Spotify is the same thing. You can actually see what people are listening to. So I use Spotify all the time. Anytime I'm playing Spotify, I can see what other people are listening to.
Yeah, I actually use that with games quite a bit, because a lot of iOS games that have multiplayer, which is also crazy that I'm playing multiplayer games on my phones, and even crazier is that most of them hook into Facebook, so they already know who my friends are. So getting in touch with the other people playing the game is very easy.
Yeah, so you're using Facebook applications all the time. I guess you're just not maybe aware of it that much.
Are there any Facebook applications that are actually within Facebook that you like?
The ones I like, yeah, I'm like you. I actually tend to not use beyond the Facebook core. I tend to not stray too far away when it comes to in Facebook apps. But outside of Facebook, I use the stuff all the time.
When you make something that big, how do those decisions actually get made? Who has to sign off on new things?
So it's crazy. So back in the day, I mean, it was so ad hoc. And I'll tell you a little story from one of the earlier episodes I had. Was, I don't know if you remember, but we used to, when someone messaged you on Facebook, for example, we used to send an email, and the email said, so-and-so messaged you on Facebook, click here to read it. Mm-hmm. And it was so frustrating, because you're just like, just put the message in the email. I know you know what the message is. And I got like 2 of them one morning, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, the message got to be in there. And so I come to the office, and I tell one of the engineers, I'm like, man, this is ridiculous. Like, we got to put the message in the email. And he goes, I actually have that coded up. It's actually commented out. So all I need to do is remove like a couple characters, and it'll be right in there. And I was like, dude, do it right now. Let's just do it. And he's like, no. Zuck needs to approve that. I go, okay. So I turn around, because Zuck was just like sitting behind me. And I said, hey, Zuck, like, we want to put the messages in the email. It's just a better user experience. And he thought about it for like 2 seconds, and he goes, yeah, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, that sounds good. And I was like, see, he's into it. I was like, do it, push it. And so he pushes it live within, the next half hour. And so the total time between like my getting the message and like me changing the experience for everyone on Facebook was like 48 minutes. And then an hour later, an article comes out that's like, Facebook forgoes millions in revenue for better user. And the article went on to state how like people wouldn't be clicking from the email back to Facebook, and so Facebook was giving up all these page views. But it's great because they're really doing it for the user experience. And I was like, oh, damn it, ads. I forgot about that. Should have spent another 6 minutes on that little problem. And so back in the day, there were probably a little bit more ad hoc decisions being made like that. Today, there's a little bit more of a process. You need to make sure that, certain teams know, because you're moving. A lot of different people are working on a lot of different parts of the site. It's at a much larger scale, different languages. So all that needs to be taken into account. That said, there's still things that have been pretty, very fast compared to other companies. And so there's still kind of a very flat, relatively, organization and a very nimble process to get stuff out the door.
Mark Zuckerberg has become such a mythological character. It's funny to hear you just calling him Zuck and just talking about like those early days. It really humanizes him. Does he have to sign off on everything?
Not anymore. I mean, he used to be so hands-on. I mean, to the point where he would just kind of like walk by your screen and he would just be like, "Oh, what are you working on?" Just like, "Oh, Facebook platform." He's like, "Yeah, okay, let me see it." And then you pull it up and be like, "I think the spacing there should be like 7 pixels, not 6 pixels. It looks a little 7 pixels looks too much." And you're like, "Aren't you the CEO? Like, let me just." And he still gets down into the weeds. He's become a much better designer over the years. Nowadays, it just doesn't scale to have one person have to sign off on everything, but it's pretty close. Like definitely the big things he has his a pretty good handle on, and he gets pretty involved.
What was it like when the movie came out?
So it's pretty funny. So it's just part of it was a little bit was an elephant in the room, right? It's just like, hey, we know this movie's coming out. It might be a little awkward. I don't know. And so at one point I was like, you know what, fuck this. Like, we should all just go see it together. I started gathering a group of people, created a Facebook event, and I said, we should all just go see it together. And eventually I got like 100 people agreeing to go see it together. And Zuck's assistant, who's amazing, she said to me, she's like, "Hey, Ben, cancel your event." And I go, "I'm not canceling the event. Like, we want to go see the movie together, so we're going to go see it together." And she's like, "I know. So cancel the event." Mark said that he's going to rent school buses, and we're going to rent out 3 movie theaters and go together as a company. And I was like, yes. And so I kind of had to like lie to the people. I was like, "Hey, the event's off. It doesn't look like this is going to happen. Sorry about that." And then basically after a meeting, one day, Mark's like, "All right, hey, I think we should take the afternoon off. I have buses out back. Let's go see a movie." Everyone's like, "What?" And then everyone realized, oh, shit, we're going to go see The Social Network.
Was that before it came out?
No, it was like the day or two after it came out. But yeah, there's scenes in there that are a little awkward.
Like which?
Like when some girl goes down on him.
Yeah. I haven't seen it in a while. What was the reaction like in the room?
I don't know that. I mean, would you expect people to just stand up and kind of hoot and holler?
Well, I don't know. Like, what was the feeling in the company after the movie came out? Were you guys happy about it? Was it a distraction?
It's weird, it's so bizarre because this is the life that we lived, and it was this weird, bizarro. Like they got so many crazy details dead on, like the shoes he wears. Some of the posters on the walls were literally like, I don't know how they got like the artwork. It's just like down to the poster, down to the mugs, down to, I mean, you name it. Like it was this crazy attention to detail, and then like huge story arcs are totally off. So it's like they got these crazy details right, but then it's like, like Zuck's personality. He's not like a neurotic. Like, like the Jesse Eisenberg, I guess, Jesse kind of has this one his range is like neurotic guy or like really neurotic guy. And so like, Zuck's just not like that. Zuck's like much more like calm, calculating, like serious, and the way he was portrayed was just kind of just like like bumbling a little bit, like a little, so it was just kind of interesting to see someone take your life and do it. Well, it was well executed, right? It's an entertaining movie.
Yeah, I love the movie.
Yeah, but you're like, well, but it's a movie.
Yeah.
Like Dustin Moskovitz was barely in there, and Dustin was a huge part of Facebook, right? And so we're like, where is Dustin in this whole thing? Like Dustin, and I think there was one scene in it where they like made Dustin's like, hey Zuck, what's this? It's like, Dustin's like a really smart engineer. He's not a moron in the one scene he has. So I think it's just like some of the personalities and the people are just not quite on. But it was a fun movie to see as a company.
Did it like energize the company?
Nah, I think it was it was fun. It was interesting. I mean, it was so. That's again, it comes back to like people aren't at Facebook for that. So like it did become a little bit annoying. Like, what do you think of the movie? And it's like, I don't. I think about like changing the world. I don't.
That's perfect. Yeah, you're so focused. You just go back from the movie like, all right, let's get back to coding.
Pretty much. I mean, there was a time where we went to see the Harry Potter premiere, and I remember I went with a bunch of Facebook engineers, and we all have the internet that's portable, those like Sprint cards.
Yeah. Like a MiFi.
Yeah. And we got there, it was like a 12:01, and we got there at 11 o'clock, and these 6 guys were sitting down and pushing site changes from the theater on their laptops at 11 o'clock at night on a Friday. And, they're surrounded by like people dressed as wizards and all this shit. And these guys are just like super focused, just like push. You're just like, Jesus. Yeah, it's just a totally different intensity. That's really like, I mean, that's the essence of it, right? It's like that focus. So like the movie was a small, fun thing. Like it was interesting, but it eventually became a distraction.
What was it like when the IPO? I mean, I guess you guys were probably talking about going public for a long time, but when that talk really came to a head, I guess about a year ago now, was that a distraction?
Yeah, it's again another one of those things where for everyone on the outside, it's like, here we go, and it was an inevitable thing. But again, for people inside, it's just another step. It's another thing that has to happen. But it's like, do you remember the Apple IPO or the IBM IPO? Right? It's like those things just don't. I don't know. It's become such a defining part of the past, like 6 months. And we try to make sure we celebrate successes, and so it's definitely emblematic of how much impact and effect Facebook has had on the world. But it's a step in the history of what I think will be a very long and fruitful company. Like Zuck really thinks about like, what does this company look like in 50 years or 100 years, right? So it's a necessary step, but again, I don't think in a year and a half, you're not going to really think about it that much more.
I think that's probably true, but I just intuitively think it would change things on the inside.
So things always change. It's not just because of the IPO. I think like, if you look at like when I joined, and it was around 200 people. And as the company, you always look back at the like good old days, right? Like every year you're just like, remember last year when it was like so much smaller and so much different. So it's not necessarily, there's some things that post IPO that do like, there's some processes and certain things that you can and can't talk about, that do change. So that does change. But, I left before the IPO on a sabbatical. But every time I've gone back to visit, the most amazing thing is how much it hasn't changed. Like the culture has actually scaled really well. The mission has stayed true, and it has stayed the same. And the people inside are still like, hey, we're building this thing that needs to change the way people communicate. Like, don't take your eye off the ball here. And so I think it's another, it's another distraction you have to learn to live with. and it's new, so people are learning to live with it. But I think they will. And so overall, you'd probably be surprised at how much it hasn't affected people inside.
There's still that work ethic of pushing code at 11 o'clock at the Harry Potter premiere.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely.
Do you guys ever think about things that could lead? Because I also think Facebook could be a company that's around a century from now. But do you ever think about things that could lead to the demise of Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, you try not to, but I think, so like in the new campus, we moved into the old Sun Microsystems campus. And I don't know if you know Sun Microsystems or remember them, but they're not around anymore, but they were a huge company. And one of the things that we did was we kept a lot of the Sun Microsystem, doors, a lot of their logos you see kind of spread out. So we didn't get rid of a lot of that stuff because we want people inside to realize you can go from big to nothing pretty fast, especially in this kind of world. And so it keeps you hungry and it keeps you motivated. So I think like understanding, we don't think about like, hey, what are the things that could derail us? I think more of the focus is like we understand the potential of what Facebook can be, and it's more about we need to execute against that, and we need to be focused executing against that, and not forget that, not take anything for granted. You can't just be like, oh well, we're 900 million people, so like let's just ride this one on home, guys. You gotta just continuously fight because especially in the Valley, I mean, there's always someone who's like trying to make a better Facebook, a better means of communication, a better than So we never rest on our laurels.
Do you think Google's going to be around in 100 years?
That's a good question. I would think so. I mean, man, they're really good at the things that they do well, like self-driving cars. That seemed insane. And then it's just like, they continue to do it. And now they have a self-driving car.
I kind of think their search has gotten worse. Like there's times when I search for something on Google, like a camera review or, there's things that don't work on Google anymore. Like I feel like there's room to improve.
Oh, no, absolutely.
On search, on their, on Googling things.
No, I would. I mean, if I was at Google, and who knows, they might be doing this, but I would just take, 50 or 100 people and just be like, put Google out of business. Like, make something that puts us out of business. And that's actually a pretty good thing to do at a big company, anywhere, any big company. Like, basically, make sure that the people who are going to put you out of business are working inside. Because I do think that their changes to search have been so iterative. Like they haven't really tried anything that's just like, whoa, like that doesn't even look like search. That looks like,
Has anyone?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen things like Wolfram Alpha, right?
That came to my mind too, yeah.
You've seen things like, who else is doing like interesting search? I mean, there's certain things, there's certain ways to search that on Facebook that you couldn't do well on Google.
Yeah, and Twitter a little bit too. Like the Twitter kind of, if you want to search for something in real time, like the reviews of the new Facebook as it's posted, you use Twitter.
Or an earthquake is happening right now. Do you go to Google to figure out if an earthquake is happening right now? It's 100 years. That's very tough to know, but they'll be around for a while. They print money over there.
Are there any experimental things that you guys worked on that just like came out crooked on the other end and you just never implemented?
Like total failures?
Yeah.
What was the Beacon? Remember Beacon?
I do remember Beacon. But
Not
that one
good.
you published, were there any that like just weren't let out of the lab?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, there's tons of stuff that doesn't make it out of the lab. I don't think I can really talk about because I don't know if that stuff will like come back.
Right, sure.
Like, yeah, there's stuff that, I mean, for everything that you see ship, there's like probably 50 things or 100 things that were just like tried and didn't make it.
Is that pace, is that like constantly having to work on things? Is that why you left?
No, I think that, I mean, the big reason why I left was, I'd been there for 5 years and I kind of got to a point where, hey, I've been here 5 years. I've kind of been heads down for the 5 years. And I mean, it's so engrossing being inside. It's just like you're building this thing that everyone uses. So it's not like you go home and you put it out of your mind, it's always undermined. You go through an airport and everyone's using it. You go home and you use it to talk to friends. It's this all-encompassing thing. It's all you think about all the time, 24/7. And so, you get to a point. Well, I got to a point after 5 years where I had to have different roles there, and I just thought, man, I need to take a little bit of a breather here and think about, do I want to be here for another 5 years, or do I want to try something new? And I'd always, when I was at Varian, it was kind of like, small companies, my own thing. And so I definitely had a little bit of an entrepreneur bug. And we actually we select for that. We try to hire people who have an entrepreneurial spirit. And so for me, it just got to the point where I wanted to take a little time and think about, do I want to be here for another 5 years, or do I want to try something else? And that was a big reason that I left.
Let's talk about that something else. What are you working on now?
So I just joined an organization called the Designer Fund. And our whole mission is to invest in designers, creating businesses with positive social impact. And the reason is, as one of the things that you see happening in design is there are a lot of companies with designer founders nowadays that are starting to do really well. So if you've ever used Airbnb or Pinterest, those companies are starting to define kind of that next generation of companies. And a big reason is that they have design as part of their core. And one of the things that we're seeing with designers is that it's starting to happen a little bit slowly, that designers are starting to take that path of entrepreneurship. But for us, it's not happening fast enough. And they're not looking at, beyond consumer tech. There's so many problems that if you actually put talented designers against those problems, you'd have huge leaps in what could happen in those spaces. So things like healthcare and education and energy, when designers decide to take on those problems, you're going to see some huge things happen. So for example, imagine if Apple tried to do, I don't know, if Apple designed the machines that you used in a hospital, for example, right? I mean, if you've been to a hospital lately, you've seen kind of how clunky and terrible that experience is, but there's a huge opportunity for that to be elegant and warm and even delightful. What would a hospital look like that you'd want to visit?
Who usually solves these problems? Who's messing up hospitals for me right now? Is it engineers? Tell me if it's engineers.
It's definitely engineers. No, it's not that it's messing up. It's just, it's hospitals are built by people who work in hospitals. Doctors are consultants on hospitals. Sometimes you'll get a design-driven consultancy like IDEA or something helping out with a little bit of the process, but it's pretty rare that you get those things being thought about from the ground up by someone whose whole mission and vision is to create this empathetic, amazing experience for people. And that's really what we want designers to start doing, is taking on these huge social problems that exist in the world and build companies around those.
Have you guys started tackling any of these social problems?
Yeah, I mean, we have a bunch of companies that we've started investing in, and designers who are taking on those problems. So there's a company called Solar Mosaic. It's almost like Kickstarter for solar projects. So think about a school that can't really afford to pay for solar panels. They let that school put that project on the site. People can invest in that project and actually make a return on their investment. So unlike Kickstarter, you actually get your money back with interest.
How do I get money back from investing in the solar panels?
Because the projects, the school is actually able to make extra money based on the money that they save with the lowered energy costs. So solar energy tends to pay for itself within like 5-10 years. I forgot like what the actual rate is. And then at that point, it's actually creating a surplus. And so a lot of people just don't have the upfront capital to pay for those projects. So if you let individuals pay for those projects, you could actually help individuals make money. You could help the environment, and you could help schools and other businesses like implement solar energy. So it's one of these like win-win-wins.
I mean, it sounds like an incredible idea, though. Why would I not do that?
It's a good question. There's no reason you wouldn't do it, which is why a lot of people have invested in this company.
That sounds really fun. Give me some others.
So another one also in the solar space is a company called Angaza Design. So it's kind of on the other side of solar, where they realize that in East Africa, people, there's a few companies that make inexpensive solar lights. In East Africa, you have a situation where people don't have electricity. And that what that means is that when the sun goes down, they can't work, they can't study. So it affects the economy in a big way. It affects the education in a big way. And some companies have tried to tackle that problem. And usually the lights go for about 50 or $60, which is still a huge amount for a lot of those families. And what Gaza does is they've created a light that you can pay for as you go through cell phones. And so they actually take a loss when they sell the light fixture, and then the family can pay like $1 a month through their cell phone, because in East Africa people actually have these low end cell phones, and that allows them to actually buy the lights and pay as they go. So it's almost like every family now has a little mini energy company at their house. The same way that they passed landlines and went straight to cell phones, and Gaza believes that in East Africa there won't actually be a centralized energy company, and people will kind of decentralize the energy.
That's cool.
Yeah.
These are cool.
Yeah.
So these are ideas from designers?
Yeah, so think a thing like on Gaza, where people who can't read need to somehow figure out how to use this pay-as-you-go light. You know, think about the IKEA catalog where there's no words, and now you have the level of complexity of like paying through your cell phone to the light fixture, but you can't use words. So that's a design problem, right? The distribution is a design problem. How do you make a light that's beautiful that people are proud to have in their home, as opposed to like, oh, well, you're poor and you have this crappy light, right? How do you make it, so the engineering problem is just the technology and making it work, and the design problem is taking it to that next level. And so that's where we think design is going to have like a big effect on a lot of these problems.
Give me one more company you guys have invested in, because there's such, I love hearing these like good ideas.
Yeah, sure. There's another one called Neighborland that we're really stoked about, and actually the guys that started Twitter are big investors in it as well. And so Neighborland, it's more of a web company, but they actually marry web and offline. And so the thinking of Neighborland is, if you want to improve your city right now, how would you go about doing
that? Roller coasters.
Let's say you do. Okay, let's say something like, where do you live? Brooklyn?
Yeah.
Okay.
No roller coasters. Oh, well, there's a cyclone. I'm talking like roller coasters that'll get you like across town.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of insane. But think about, let's say you wanted a farmer's market.
That'd be good too.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, I want a farmer's market in Brooklyn on Thursdays, right?
I guess.
Sure. Let's just say, okay, how do you go about doing that right now? Like, you go to like a city council meeting and say like, hey, I'm Jeff. I think a farmer's market's a great idea, right? Like, people of our generation have no idea how to actually affect change in these big bureaucracies. And so what Neighborland does is it lets people post these ideas that they have that they think would be good at improving a city, and then you can gather support around these cities, so people can go on the site and see what are the ideas that people want to have happen. So let's say you're like, hey, I want a farmer's market every Thursday in Brooklyn, and other people can say like, I want that too. And then after you get 500, 700, 1,000 people behind it, the city actually, when there's that many people behind an idea, they'll take notice. And so Neighborland helps you they'll connect the pieces and say like, hey, there's 1,000 people that want, hey, Mr. Councilman, hey, Mr. Mayor, there's 1,000 people that want this to happen. These are your citizens. Help them make it happen. And they've actually seen that impact. And so it's a way for citizens to actually engage in their city and make change happen, which our generation just feel, we just complain like, oh, I wish there were bike lanes. Oh, I wish there were this, but you can actually, so imagine a site like that, if it can empower every citizen to affect the way their city is built and engage them in that. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
That sounds like something the government should be doing for me. How is that a company?
You're absolutely right. It is something you would hope that the government would do, but the government just, they don't have the best product designers and the best engineers working for the U.S. government.
Now, all I care about is money. So how does a company like that actually make money?
That's a good question. We'll find out soon enough. But you can see there's a lot of different ways that a company like that, once you have a platform that enables cities to change, there are different ways. They're still early on, so I don't want to talk too much about their monetization, but there are a bunch of different ways. So for like a really easy one, as an example, if you're a developer, right, you have a building, and you're trying to think like, well, what businesses do I want in my building? Imagine if instead of guessing, I could tell you that 1,000 people want a Whole Foods in your building. That's kind of valuable, and developers pay for that. So a lot of these businesses, we make sure that these businesses are not only, we talk about, there's a great phrase I heard recently, is do good and do well. So we believe that actually there's businesses that do good for society can actually do well financially. And so we find businesses that have social impact baked in to the very core of the business.
And now, how do you spend your time? Are you usually trying to find these companies? Do you ever actually get to design anything anymore?
All of it, right? So like we're building this community of designers. We're trying to find more companies. We're building out our organization. I mean, we even, we just moved to a new space where, we have to do everything that a small business does. We also have partners that we need to make sure that their design needs are addressed. So there's a lot of, a big part of my moving on from Facebook was to kind of grow in other areas outside of design, which I love. So I do spend a good deal of time too, just thinking about growing this organization, growing the community, helping these companies grow and scale. So you're really doing design, business, consulting, advising, mentoring.
Yeah, it sounds really cool, and it's amazing how your work has like made its mark in history, kind of. Not to sound too grandiose about it, but it's cool to see you applying that to something else now.
Yeah, no, it feels great. It feels right, and it feels, I mean, to be able to, the guys who are building Neighborland, and they have a lot of the same issues that I've seen at Facebook, so I can just say like, they're like, well, what do you think of this? And I'm like, that's not going to work because I actually tried that 5 times at Facebook to do this, So I can, for a lot of the companies that are web-based, I can just kind of help them based on the lessons I learned at Facebook and make sure that they are just moving forward as opposed to failing in the same ways that we failed.
Well, Ben, I've known you for a long time, and it's so exciting. This new project obviously sounds amazing. Thank you so much for doing the show.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
This was fun. How is it, having listened to the show, how is it being on it? Did it surprise you?
Well, it's bizarre because you have your show voice, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
So I feel like it just feels surreal. It's like, wait, he's on the it feels like you're on the show. So I'm listening, like the show is interacting with me somehow.
I don't intentionally do the show voice thing, but I don't know, there's this mic in front of me, and I'm just like alone in my apartment, so I just have to talk to it a certain way.
Show voice is good. I don't not definitely use the show voice, but it's very clearly like he's on the show.
That's fun. Okay, we have a lot of business to get to, so let's just jump right into it. First of all, obviously, I have a Tumblr, jeffrubin.com. I'm on Twitter, where I am at Jeff Rubin Show. I have a Facebook fan page, and youtube.com/JeffRubin, Jeff Rubin. Want to play you guys a preview of next week's episode, where I will be talking to the editor of one of my favorite publications, the AV Club. If you guys listen to the show, you probably hear me talk about the AV Club all the time. Next week, one of the editors and writers is going to be on the show. Keith Phipps is his name, and here's a clip. Newspapers or magazines, they have a film critic and they have a music critic, but you and all the other people at the AV Club seem to write about all these things and cover multiple types of media. Was that a conscious decision?
Kind of. Not. I think initially it was because we were so short-staffed that someone's got to write about the new Guided by Voices album. Do you like to write about music, Keith? Yeah, sure. I think we've got to be able to specialize more as we've gotten bigger. But even now that we have a freelance budget, which I didn't even have for years, but I can actually have writers who aren't on staff write about things. I like to keep it kind of a tight crew. And I like to keep I do like people who don't necessarily specialize and who can talk about different things intelligently and can review an episode of say Parenthood and an album if necessary at the same time. And I think it kind of attracts people who do have a lot of interests. So and I think it's I don't know. I think it's also true of how we consume pop culture. Like you don't just like movies, right?
No, I like music too.
You also listen to music and watch television.
But I talk about movies and I talk about TV a lot on the show, but I honestly don't think I could talk about music. I'm not that great at kind of isolating what it is I like about a song, and I don't know that I can't talk about it in the same way.
I think it's the toughest thing to write about, for sure.
I am very excited about posting that. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. But now, I got a little deleted scene from this week's episode with Ben. I gotta set this up a little bit. Sometimes the Jeff Rubin studio technology isn't perfect. And this rarely happens, it really does. But when I called Ben, we started talking over Skype, and then the connection was bad. I forget exactly what was going on, but we had to start over. We really didn't get very far into it. But I did have time to start by asking, I said, hey, Ben, okay, first question. Do you have any embarrassing stories about your brother? Because I'm very funny, and his brother, Amir Blumenfeld, who I think we mentioned, of Jake and Amir. Anyway, that's not in the show. What you heard was actually a re-recording of the opening. Fascinating, some inside baseball. Go back and check that out. And appreciate that the second time we did that if you're the most boring person in the world. But if not, just take my word for it. And at the end of the conversation, there was a moment where Ben referenced that opening. And I had to take it out because he was referencing something that you guys weren't hearing. And also because he was talking about Amir, and I thought this was a separate conversation anyway. So here is Ben talking about his brother, Amir. And also you have to know that their older brother, who I think is older, the oldest brother, is a doctor. Okay, here we go. It's really cool that your brother's a doctor, and that you've made your mark on the world in this very interesting way, and that your other brother just farts on camera for a living.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, like, he has the best life ever. I mean,
that may be true.
You just watch his outtakes, right? And it's just like he laughs all day long. That's, it's just like, how much better does life get? Like, he must just laugh 50% of the day. He's just like laughing, crying,
Was he always like that?
Yeah, that kid was always, I don't know if you ever saw, there's a video he posted when he was like in 10th grade or 9th grade, like at school, just fucking with his teachers. We used to shoot videos when he was like, he must have been 6 or 7 and I was 10 or 11, and we took our dad's VHS camera and we used to shoot ridiculous, like you asked me earlier about an embarrassing story. Him and his friend Roy, you remember Pete and Pete?
Sure do. Shot in my hometown of Cranford, New Jersey.
Yeah, so we did a Geet and Geet, and we just used to do spoofs on like Nickelodeon shows when he was like 7 years old. So he was doing that stuff forever. I think a lot of people don't realize just like how much time he's been doing comedy in front of a camera. It's like, wow, your brother's really taken off. It's like, yeah, in 20 years of like concerted, diehard effort of like 10, 12-hour days just shooting nonstop. Yeah,
that's something we talked about when he was on the podcast. I gotta talk to your other brother too. I gotta complete the set.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
That would be amazing. By the way, we are back to present Jeff now. Well, present to me. It's everything, I guess, is in the past you, but relatively present. One more piece of information I gotta get out before I can let you go. I am going to be doing a live Jeff Rubin show. Now, regular Jeff Rubin listeners may remember that in the Pete Holmes episode, I believe I talked to Pete about how I don't like live podcasts usually, and yet here I am doing one, and what's changed is that someone asked me, the New York Podfest, which is a new thing, and they asked me, and there were already a ton of great shows on the bill that I was a fan of, like Julie Klausner Show and Craig Rowan Show and Comic Book Club with Alex Albin and Justin Tyler, who've been on this show. So I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. And that's not for a while. It is in January. I will certainly be plugging it more as we get closer. I've got no idea what I'm going to do there. Basically, all I know right now is that Scott of Scott's Pizza Tours, who has been on the show many times, and also performed the theme song to the show, will be performing the theme song live at the live recording. That's in January. I will remind you as we get closer. So that's in January. Keith Phipps next week. Thank you again for listening. Thank you, Ben, for not only doing the show, but sticking through the technical difficulties. I will see you on Tuesday.